Part 214. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2135. The two dug a big hole along the clump of plants, and dug out the whole plant wrapped in a lot of mud. Looking at it, Man Bao felt that the survival rate was very high. As soon as the roots were exposed, Man Bao squatted down to look at it. She felt very familiar. She carefully cut one off, and after smelling it, she said, "It seems to be Yamashita." Man Bao wiped the soil with his hands, peeled off a layer of skin, and stuffed it into her mouth. After tasting it, she pouted and said, "It's the root of the mountain." She looked at the lush plant in front of her, and then at the root in her hand, and suddenly realized, so this is Yamagata. Bai Shan asked, "What's the use of it?" Man Baodao, "It can stop bleeding, reduce swelling, and relieve pain. It can be used to treat stomach pain, scabies, rubella, and bleeding from knife wounds. I often use it with the root bark of Schisandra chinensis, rush, and plantain for stomach pain." It's just that she knows Yamaguchi, but she has never seen Yamaguchi. Man Bao carefully looked at Yamakashi and then got up and looked left and right. Keek said, "Except Bai Shan, no one is watching you nearby." Man Bao said, "He is no one else." Anyway, he saw that she had harvested cows, sheep, horses, deer. Now it doesn't matter if he sees her harvesting one more plant. Man Bao has recorded the mountain, and there is no picture information of the mountain in the encyclopedia, and there is no specific description of its appearance, so Keek did not detect what it was called at first. But as soon as Man Bao said that it was a mountain, it called up the corresponding data information, but it was not much, just 2 sentences. Man Bao glanced at it, and didn't know as much as she did. However, I believe that the Science and Technology Museum of the Encyclopedia will study the detailed information, and she will be able to check it at that time. Man Bao said, "It's best to study how this thing is best grown. Since there are people who specialize in planting here, it means that the roots of the rhizomes harvested in the drugstore are not all wild, and can be planted just like Ligustrum lucidum. At that time, you can take some seeds back and let the third brother and the others try to plant them. They have a lot of mountains." Bai Shan saw the mountain tree disappear with his own eyes. He couldn't help but look up at the empty mid-air seriously. After a while, he asked Man Bao, "Is Uncle Joe gone?" Man Bao nodded. Kakamer was silent. Bai Shan couldn't help but be curious. "I've always wanted to ask, what does Uncle Joe do with these flowers and plants? He knew about cattle, sheep, and deer, and he could raise them, eat them, and use them to honor Shangguan, but what about these numerous flowers, plants, trees, insects, fish, birds, and beasts?" Man Bao said, "Exchange money. Points are like money." Man Bao took another look at his total points, which had shrunk a lot, and his heart ached just thinking about it. She said solemnly, "Money can sometimes change lives. She needs to earn more, otherwise what if she is in danger when she goes out? Sometimes people in this world can't do things that can't be done by human beings. You have to find a way in the encyclopedia or the mall, and you will need to spend points." Bai Shan thought of the pills she took out in Xiaohu with a sore face every time. He guessed a little. It seems that the pills given by the little father-in-law were not made by himself, but bought with money. The money was earned from the flowers, trees, insects, fish, birds, and beasts given by Man Bao. It's a pity that the money in the two worlds seems to be different, otherwise they can give gold and silver to the little father-in-law. Bai Shan felt regretful in his heart, and when he saw Man Bao Yuan's wrinkled face, still distressed, he couldn't help laughing, stretched out his hand and pinched her cheek, and said, "It's all right, we're going out now. Now, along the way, you will definitely find a lot of things that you haven't seen before, and then you will put them away and give them to you, Uncle Joe." Man Bao patted his hand and said solemnly, "I've grown up now, you can't pinch my face anymore." After saying that, he stared at his cheek, very sorry. In the past 2 years, Bai Shan has grown, and there is no round baby fat anymore, and she can't pinch it if she wants to. It's his own. Man Bao couldn't help touching it, it was always there, and he didn't know when his face would grow longer. The two filled in the big hole on the ground, and then went back with their hose. When Mr. Zhuang saw them come back with a hoe, he glanced at their shoes, saw a lot of dirt on them, shook his head, pointed to the outside, and said, "Clean up before entering the house." The two looked down at their feet and silently turned around and stood on the grass to clean up. Yin Or was sitting in the lobby to rest, reading a book in his hand. There was nothing he could do, and the journey was boring, so he occasionally read. Bai Erlang was also reading the book, but the cover seemed to be wrong. Lu Huan was very close to him, his eyes fixed on his book. Zhou Liru, who had finished his homework, let out a sigh of relief, put away the ink stick, and was about to wash his pen. When he looked up and saw it, he couldn't help staring at the book in their hands. After a while, she stretched out 2 fingers and gently uncovered the cover. Bai Erlang was startled, and immediately pulled back the cover that was about to fall off. He looked at Mr. Zhuang nervously. Seeing that Mr. Zhuang was still looking at Bai Shan and Zhou Man outside, he breathed a sigh of relief. He winked at Zhou Liru. Zhou Liru had already seen the mystery, shrugged his shoulders and laughed twice, took out the pen and inkstone to wash, and returned to put his study room in the box, while Mr. Look. Bai Erlang also glanced at Mr. Zhuang and whispered, "Ask your aunt to ask for it. She also owns this book. She has a lot." Zhou Liru said, "I want to see what you've read, which one do you think is the best?" After all, he wrote the script by himself. Oh, no, he is a biography person. Now the most popular book in Beijing is the biography of his second brother-in-law written by him. I heard that students who come to Beijing every year to take the exam will buy 2 sets, 1 set for collection. I read it for myself, so that even now my aunt and my uncle can still receive the money from the bookstore. That's right, the bookstore is still sending money to Bai Shan and Man Bao. However, Bai Shan and Man Bao are no longer monopolizing it, but take it out and share it with Bai Erlang. Even Bai Er owns 40%, and they only get 30%. Although it was said at the beginning, the 3 of them thought together, Bai Erlang wrote and signed, and the income went to Bai Shan and Man Bao. But after writing the book for so long, I still receive money from the publication, and I feel a little embarrassed to monopolize Bai Shan and Man Bao. So I gave some to Bai Erlang. It is also because of this that the talents in Chongquen Hall like to borrow money from Bai Erlang so much. Because they all know that he not only has Zhuang's income, but also regularly takes money from the bookstore, and that he has received no less than before in the past 2 years. Bai Erlang tasted the sweetness himself, and said to Bai Shan before going out, "I want to write a book of knights who go to the western regions with swords. When you come back, you and Man Bao will talk to the owner of the bookstore for me. Divide it into the same book as the next 2 books, do you think it's all right? See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2136. The biography of Xiang Mingxiu written by Bai Erlang is divided into 3 volumes. Later, the 2 volumes were discussed by Bai Shan, and they directly discussed the share. Although there are many copies of books in the capital, as long as they are engraved and printed, they are basically given a share of money, so until now, every month the bookstore all sent money to Zhou's house. Bai Erlang quietly glanced at the husband again through the book, and whispered to Zhou Liru, "I think the best book is 3 Heroes, which I read a few years ago, and it is also your aunt's book, but she probably didn't bring." Lu Huan immediately asked, "Why didn't I hear you say it? The last time you recommended me to watch 10 Years of Dawai, it looks good, but it feels like reading a history book. I was still in Yazhu at that time, and I didn't know you. If you didn't ask me, how could I say it?" Lu Huan sighed, "You yas who have so many chivalrous words." That's right, Man Bao and Bai Shan have average abilities, but they are very good at choosing books. They can always buy books that are better than mine. Last time Bai Shan bought a hand-copied book at the booth. Jin Shiji, when I first glanced at the cover, I thought it was written about those gold and bronze seals and stones, but who knew it was written by two knights seeking immortality. It was very interesting, but the two were surnamed Jin and the other was surnamed Jin. Stone, so it is called The Legend of the Golden Stone. Yin Or couldn't help putting down the book and asked, "How about the choice of words and sentences?" Half-white, I don't have this popular book in my hand. The words and sentences are very gorgeous. I think it is very beautiful. There are also several poems written by the author. I think I can use it to submit the book. Even Yin he couldn't hold back when he heard it. Where's the book? I've finished watching it, and now it's Man Bao watching. You ask her. Man Bao really brought it? She has geek, so she brings the most books. Not only a bookshelf full of space, but also a lot of luggage. After all, she can't conjure books out of thin air, right? Therefore, she has a large box specially for her books. In addition to some medical books, there are also some of her notes, some collections of classics and history, and a lot of blank booklets and pen and ink are stuffed. She had always taken care of that box by herself, so apart from herself, even Bai Shan didn't know which books she had brought. As soon as Yin he asked, she went to the car and flipped it over, then flipped out the book to him, and gave Zhou Liru a copy, but it was not the biography of the three heroes recommended by Bai Er, but the what? 10 years. She said, "You are still young, don't read miscellaneous books such as the biography of the three heroes, read medical books, and occasionally read the classics and history when you have time. The what 10 years is written in vernacular, which is very interesting. You can take a look." Zhou Liru took it and responded. She is not as good as her sister-in-law. She needs to read many times to remember the reading, especially now that she has to learn acupuncture, pharmacology, and pulse diagnosis, and there is not much free time. Therefore, I read few other books. Basically, she read whatever book my aunt recommended her to read. After dividing the books, Man Bao also began to secretly search on the bookshelf in the space, and soon found a book that he had never read but had always been interested in, then looked left and right, reached into the box and flipped through it. He tucked it into his arms as if he had taken it out of the box. Seeing that she was sneaking like this, Bai Shan knew that she was not reading serious books. Thinking that he was short of books recently, he leaned over and asked in a low voice, "Do you have any other books there?" Man Bao rolled his eyes and touched the box again, finding one for Bai Shan. The two sneaked back to the room holding the book. Mr. Zhuang saw it from a distance and couldn't help shaking his head. The inn has ingredients provided by Daji, and finally prepared a decent dinner. When Bai Shan and the others were eating, the postmaster gave his son 20 pennies and asked him to rush to his uncle's house to get the seeds on the post's horse. So before it got dark, Man Bao and the others saw the seeds of the mountain and wrapped a small packet in paper. Man Bao looked at it carefully and found that all were active, so she gave Yi Cheng half of it and smiled. "It's fine when the soil is slightly damp, don't water too much, since your Yu family can grow it. Why don't you ask for more advice?" Yu Chen bowed down and thanked him. In fact, he was not very interested in planting this thing. It was just that his mother-in-law thought about using this to make money. If you want him to say that it takes 3 or 4 years to dig up the roots, the root of a tree is not worth much, and it is unnecessary to go to the trouble. However, Man Bao felt that the post station was broken like this, and their family's life would not be much better, so it would be a good thing to have another income. Man Bao collected the other half of the seeds, found a small box in the space to put it on, and then wrote a note and put it on the shelf. When the encyclopedia's research comes out, she will see how to plant it well. If the seeds are difficult to cultivate, she will hand it over to the encyclopedia for breeding, and then she will find a way to send it back to the third brother to plant. There are also many uses for the root of the mountain, and the medicinal materials grown on the mountain in their family are still a little thin. It was getting dark, and the Yuchen lit the lamp painfully. Looking at the familiar expression on his face, Man Bao knew what he was thinking, so he smiled and said, "It's strangely cold, don't you have a brazier? Just use the brazier to make a fire and turn off the lights." The postmaster said, "How good is this? Adults are here, they can't touch the dark, and adults also need to read books." Bai Erlang and the others on the side have been holding the book with gusto, showing great diligence. Mr. Zhuang knew that what they were reading was not a serious book, otherwise how could they read so energetically? He glanced over and said directly, "Don't read it, put down the book and rest your eyes." Bai Erlang and the others put down the book reluctantly, and then sat down around the brazier. Bai Shan sighed, "This year is colder than in previous years, and it's still not hot yet." Yi Cheng sat with him, nodded and bowed in response with a yes. Bai Shan asked curiously, "Now you've started sowing rice seeds, right?" "Yes, the seedlings have already come out, and they can be planted in another half a month." Yi Cheng didn't expect that this immortal son still knew about the farming season, and said with a smile, "We are better here. I heard that this year's grassland snow disaster, there was also smallpox, and a lot of people died. Now the snow has not melted over there, and I don't know what life will be like. When the adults go north, are they going to Xiaohu or other places?" The news of the post station has always been much better informed than other places, and the news of the capital has been screened, and because there are too many news sent to the capital, they have no chance to know many things. Bai Shan said, "Let's go to the western regions." He didn't hide their purpose, and said, "I heard that there is a smallpox vaccination method in the western regions, so let's go look for it." Yi Cheng was surprised for a moment and said, "If you can find such a method, it is a matter of infinite merit. Zhou Tai is really amazing." Man Bao, who was poking the fire beside him, paused for a while before giving the compliment. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2137. Everyone gathered around the stove and talked for more than an hour, until Mr. Zhuang felt sleepy and everyone dispersed. In a place like the post station, there is only one house within a radius of 5 miles, so at night, I always sleep when it's dark, and the postman's eyes are almost squinting when he returns. His mother-in-law couldn't help muttering, "The people in the city are weird. They don't sleep when it's dark, and they sit together and gossip." Yuchen said, "Don't talk nonsense, I think these adults are just as they say in the play, they are observing the sentiments of the people. We are just a family of 5 here, what are the feelings of the people? Yuchen, they asked a lot of things, but we didn't ask much about our family. If you don't understand, don't talk nonsense." His mother-in-law couldn't help muttering, "I don't understand why. By the way, do you know where they dug the mountain pepper? Where did the digging go? I just want to ask you if I don't know. I also wanted to find a broken wooden barrel for them to plant, but I took it and shook it around and didn't see where it was stored." The Yuchen didn't care, "Maybe you will get a car. There are so many cars from those nobles. Don't go there and hang around. We can't say if anything is lost." "I know, I just took a look at it from a distance. The mountain pepper is not small, how can I put it in the car?" The Yuchen had already fallen asleep. The couple got up before dawn the next day, woke up a few children, and made breakfast for them. After Man Bao and the others ate a bowl of noodles, they left and continued to Xiaohu. They don't go very fast, and they stop and rest for 2 days when they come across a good or interesting place. Nai Kenjun belonged to the Yin family. Knowing that Yin was not in good health, he naturally had no problem with the convoy stopping to rest, but the two pedestrians at Honglu Temple were anxious for a while. But following Mr. Zhuang and the others climbing the mountain, visiting local famous doctors, and meeting local officials and some people, they gradually adapted to everyone's rhythm and knew that they would go down like this, not to mention the planned 5 months. It would be nice to be able to return to Chang'an in 5 years. Turning around and thinking, in terms of age, Mr. Zhuang is older than them, in terms of future, Bai Shan, Zhou Man, Bai Chang, whoever singled out is far older than them, time is more precious to them than the two of them. They are not in a hurry, so they don't need to be in a hurry. So he also began to wander freely, and occasionally discussed with Mr. Zhuang about the collection of classics and history. The two pedestrians were born in the Mingjing department, but they also yearned for the Jinshi department, so they could ask Mr. Zhuang for some unknown places. And Mr. Zhuang and others also want to learn some languages on the grasslands and the western regions with them. For a time, the wind of learning in the team was particularly strong. Man Bao, Bai Shan, and Bai Erlang had been preparing for this 2 years earlier, so they knew some everyday expressions. However, what they learned was either Mandarin or the language of a large clan, and they were not as many as the two pedestrians, let alone proficient. So they've been learning languages with them lately. To everyone's surprise, Zhou Liru was the one who learned the fastest. Bai Shan and Man Beiyin may be known as Bo Wen's strong memorizers, but a sentence has to be repeated several times before it can be remembered and repeated, and it always comes with various accents and needs constant correction. But Zhou Liru learned it after listening to it twice more. And she has a very good memory for these languages. What she learned today can basically be remembered the next day, and then she can use it to talk to the two pedestrians. By the time of Ziyazhu, Zhou Liru had already written down some of the words he used on a daily basis, but there was still a tendency to surpass Bai Er who had prepared in advance. Bai Er couldn't help but say, Bai Shan and Man Bao, look at you, you have learned from others for more than a year, but you are not as good as her 20 days of learning from others. Bai Shan. Man Bao was not convinced. What about you, have you caught up with my niece? Bai Erlang, I didn't, that's because I've never learned well, and you haven't learned well. Yin, he said, it's still too late to learn. Lu Huan hesitated, it's too late, after Ziyazhu is the grassland. Anyway, there are two pedestrians, why do we have to learn the language by ourselves? Everyone looked at him together, and then said, you'll know when you get to the mutual market. The convoy slowly arrived under the Ziyazhu city gate. Man Bao lifted the curtain of the car and raised his head to look at the high city gate. At this time, Ziyazhu was a little different from when they left. There were more pedestrians entering and leaving the city gate, and they were more popular. Some guards came forward with the documents. They were a team of imperial envoys, so they entered directly from the other side of the city gate. They slowly entered the city on this side, and the city guard who had only read the document on the other side immediately sent someone to inform Yang Heshu from the governor's mansion. When entering the city, Man Bao put down the curtains, nothing alarming, but the city guard who read the documents kept staring at the convoy, and when the convoy was halfway through, he couldn't help but grab a person and asked, didn't it say that Imperial Physician Zhou was in the team? What about people? Miss Man is in the second car. Do you know our Miss Man? When the city guard heard this, he immediately smiled and said, we people in Ziyazhu city don't recognize Zhou Tai. Have you seen the 3 pock marks on my face? Zhou Tai has been cured. Guard, I have a pock mark on my face, what's there to be proud of? The city guard is proud that he survived the smallpox. He was from the military camp, and the last survivors who got smallpox in the military camp were cured by Zhou Man's treatment. He only left 3 pock marks, much stronger than the others. Now that Imperial Physician Zhou had passed, he could only let go of him regretfully and watched the convoy slowly enter the city. After entering the city, Man Bao lifted the curtain and looked outside again. Bai Shan also looked out. He and Man Bao said, Xiaohu city is different from before. Man Bao nodded, they have more smiles on their faces, and the traces of smallpox are no longer visible. Bai Shan's mouth curled slightly and said, Brother Yang's ability is beyond doubt. The convoy continued in the direction of the inn. The station in Xiaohu city was near the county office, and the convoy came to one side. Someone from the governor's house greeted him and said to Zhou Man, Master Zhou, just leave the convoy to the younger ones, and we will send them to the station. The adult said that in the mansion has prepared water and wine, please let the gentleman go over to rest first, and the gentleman will live in the governor's mansion for the past 2 days, and let us, my lords, do the best of our friendship. Man Bao and Bai Shan looked at each other and nodded. So the 6 of them took Mr. Zhuang to the governor's mansion first. The carriage and horses listened directly to the side door of the governor's mansion, and Mrs. Kui stood at the side door to greet them. She smiled and said, Husband, he is still busy in front of him, so he can't get away for the time being, but someone told me, let me treat them well. You. She smiled and said, knowing that you are coming, I cleaned up the 2 courtyards early, and you will live here, which is better than the inn. Man Bao responded with a smile, I'm sorry to bother my school sister-in-law. Kui Shi smiled and said you were welcome. She asked, how many days can you stay in Xiaohu? Man Bao said, I want to see the situation in Xiaohu first. She also wanted to know about the later health of these smallpox patients and see if the medication had any adverse effects on their bodies. By the way, let's inquire about the situation on the grassland. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2138. The governor's mansion is much larger than the county government office, and the official residence at the back is naturally larger than the county government office's backyard. Previously, so many people from the Niu family were more than enough to live in the governor's mansion, and when Yang Heshu moved in, it was naturally more comfortable. Chi Geer was still young, so he lived with his parents in the main courtyard. Only the main courtyard lived in the main courtyard of such a large governor's mansion, and the other courtyards were empty. This time when Zhou Man and the others came, Kui Shi simply packed out 2 yards for Bai Shan and the others to live in, while Man Bao and Zhou Liru lived in a small courtyard on the other side, separate from their 2 yards. Their carriages had personal items on them, and the luggage carts were all delivered to the inn. Kui Shi also prepared a lot of things for them. As soon as Man Bao arrived in the room, the girl brought clean clothes and water for bathing. So Man Bao took a good shower, and when she came out of the tub yawning and sleepy, Mrs. Kui had arranged to sit and wait in the outer room. She came out wet with only her blouse and hair over her hair, and Kui hurriedly said to the girl, quickly dry her hair. Immediately, a girl stepped forward to serve her, and another girl took a coat and put it on her. Man Bao sat cross-legged on the couch and let them do it. He yawned and his tears were about to come out. Why did you come here? Kui Shi smiled and said, come here to see how you are doing. I was worried that you would lose weight on the way, but who knows, it seems that you have recovered some. Previously, Zhou Man had been in Xiaohu for almost 4 months, and she lost a lot of weight, and most of the baby fat on her face had gone away, but when she looked at it again after 2 months, she gained weight again. Man Bao subconsciously touched his waist. It was okay, although it was still fleshy, it was still a waist. She said, I lived outside the palace for a period of time after I went back. I could eat my sister-in-law's meals every day. She made me a lot of soup to drink. Soup is very nourishing. Kui Shi reached out and squeezed her cheek and said, it's still a little fatter to look good, but I was too thin before, it hurts to look at it. Kui Shi was closer to Zhou Man than before, and Man Bao could naturally feel it. She smiled and fell asleep with her drooping eyelids. Kui Shi saw her sleepiness and guessed that she should have been smoked by hot water. On the road, even if they don't worry about eating and drinking, it will not be convenient to wash them. The 8-day journey from the capital to Xiaoshu took 19 days to arrive, so I'm afraid they haven't washed well. So Kuishi looked at the girl and gave them a wink. Soon a girl came up with a quilt, spread a layer on the wooden couch, and let Man Bao lean on the soft pillow. As soon as Man Bao leaned down, his eyelids drooped down. Mrs. Kui sat for a while, and when she heard her long breathing, she knew she was asleep, so she got up and left. Like her, there were many people who slept because of a comfortable bath, so Mr. Zhuang was in good spirits. After bathing, he sat in the yard to bask in the sun, and waited for Yang Heshu by the way. Yang Heshu was busy until noon before finishing the important matters at hand. When they returned to the backyard, Man Bao and the others had already slept for more than half an hour. Mrs. Kui poured him a cup of tea and said, "I see that they are all very sleepy, so I didn't let the kitchen start, and waited for them to wake up before eating." Yang Heshu nodded, "All right." Mrs. Kui, "But Mr. Zhuang didn't sleep. He's basking in the sun in the yard." Yang Heshu got up and said, "Send some lunch over there. I'll go over to eat with my husband, and talk by the way." Mrs. Kui responded and asked someone to make them something they both liked to eat and send it over. Mr. Zhuang was just trying to get to know the situation in the grasslands with Yang Heshu. Even a small broken station knows about the difficult life on the grasslands this year, and Xiaoshu, which has half of the grassland under its jurisdiction, is naturally more aware. Yang Heshu said, "Smallpox is the most serious in Xiaoshu city, but some people have also spread to the grasslands, where the area is vast and sparsely populated." He said, "Some tribes are infected when they are infected. There are not many medicines, and it is basically the disaster of genocide, so this year's life on the grasslands is also a bit difficult." Mr. Zhuang couldn't help asking, "Did the disease spread from Xiaoshu?" Yang Heshu nodded, "I have investigated, and the first case was indeed that orchid. She became ill after entering Xiaoshu city, but..." He raised his eyebrows and said, "I started to control the outflow after I knew that there was smallpox, because there is a lack of doctors and medicines in the north, and fewer people ran there. Accidentally contracted the disease and went back to spread the word, but I heard from a businessman from the western regions who came from Illinois recently that there were also people suffering from smallpox on the grassland over there." Mr. Zhuang learned more from Man Bao. He said, "Someone reported this to the Taiyuan hospital." Man Bao suspects that smallpox occurred at about the same time in the two places. After a while, Mr. Zhuang asked, "I wonder what the people on the grassland think about this at this time." To the Han people in Xiaoshu, Yang Heshu said, "They think smallpox is a punishment from heaven, a punishment for doing bad things." He frowned tightly and said, "Although I don't hate the Han people, several people died on the grasslands for sacrifice." Mr. Zhuang didn't speak for a long time, and after a long time he asked, "How is the situation now?" "It's all over. The imperial court has sent medicinal materials to various tribes and scattered people on the grassland 3 times before, all of which were prepared according to the prescriptions of the imperial hospital, but the young doctors over there and the smallpox on the grassland seem to be more vicious. The survival rate only 30%. Yang Heshu said, "The most important thing on the grasslands is not the smallpox, but the snow disaster." He said, "Xiaoshu is okay, is who, including Suzhou, it snowed again some time ago." Mr. Zhuang counted the time, "How come?" Yang Heshu nodded, "The weather is not good this year, so the herdsmen on the grasslands are even more difficult, and because of this, they also believe that this is a punishment from heaven." Mr. Zhuang stopped talking. Yang Heshu can only remind, "Sir, be careful this time. Bai Shan and the others are young, so they must be restrained so that no misfortune will come out of their mouths." Yang Heshu didn't believe in gods and Buddhas. He knew that Bai Shan was a religious believer, but he didn't believe in sacrifices. A few young people are young and impulsive. They go to the grassland. If they accidentally encounter such a thing, I am afraid that they will not stand up, and it will be bad when something happens. The grasslands were different from the central plains. The imperial court basically had little control over the areas north of Fengzhou and west of Liangzhou. These areas were all border towns, and officials basically only managed the Han people in the city, and it was difficult to control the herdsmen on the grasslands. If they clashed with the herdsmen, the officials on the court side would not actually have that much face. The herdsmen still listen to the tribe, and the tribe basically does not listen to the officials of the court. Mr. Zhuang nodded solemnly, and he understood with a sullen face. When Man Bao and the others woke up, it was already half-afternoon. Yang Heshu went back to the front to handle official business. Even Mr. Zhuang took a break and sat down to read a book in the corridor. The 6 teenagers went out feeling their stomachs, feeling very hungry. Good night. Too sleepy today, Xiaoxian wanted to take a day off. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2139. The 6 did not see Yang Heshu until the sunset, so a group of people gathered together for a dinner and learned about the situation in Xiaohu. The situation in Xiaohu is much better now. Before Yang Heshu returned to Xiaohu with the supplies aided by the court, he had to leave Xiaohu because of various rumors. Before, the resentment of the smallpox epidemic was mainly concentrated on the Niu family and Yang Heshu. The reason for the Niu family goes without saying, but Yang Heshu and the local people in Xiaohu believed that if it wasn't for Yang Heshu's closure of the city, so many people would not have died in Xiaohu. If they could go south or east to seek medical treatment, they would have at least half their lives. Even if they know that the closure of the city can be the most effective way to prevent the spread of smallpox, but it really involves the lives of themselves and their relatives, how many people can agree with the closure of the city without regret? Yang Heshu naturally knew that this was indisputable, and he did not argue, but after he left Xiaohu with the officials of Dali Temple, the rumors in the city slowly changed direction. Kui moved to Zhuangzi outside the city to live, but she did not do anything. Yang Heshu only brought one wanchen into Beijing, and the others, including her master, were left to her. The people of Xiaohu began to remember that Yang Heshu had always been on the front line in order to save people. Smallpox patients were all isolated, and even their family members had abandoned them and were unwilling to take care of them in the hospital shed. But Mr. Yang basically went to the hospital once a day, and sometimes went to comfort the patients himself. It can be said that he did not care about his own safety. Moreover, Lord Yang's wife was also infected with smallpox, and she was also not sent out of the city. Although some people thought that Yang Heshu's actions were too cruel, most people were moved by his selflessness. At least, Mrs. Yang, like them, did not go out of the city, and did not treat her specially because she was the county magistrate's wife. In addition, Lord Yang has always worked hard to get food, medicinal materials, and money from the imperial court. Not to mention the rich people who are sick this time, at least the vast majority of ordinary people use medicine for treatment. When everyone is cured, they can turn around and leave without paying a penny. Of course, if it is not cured, it will be directly lifted and burned, without even the bones. Because of these remarks, Yang Heshu's image finally turned around slowly, and the people in the city felt less resentment towards him. Ordinary people, in particular, turned to resentment against the Niu family before long, and they were more grateful and sympathetic to Yang Heshu. As for the local gentry and wealthy businessmen, Kui Shi and Shiye thought about it for a few days and still obeyed Yang Heshu's suggestion. It was revealed that Yang Heshu was going to be transferred back to the capital, and that Niu Shishi might have to commit crimes and be demoted to the magistrate of Shuofang County. As soon as this news came out, not only ordinary people, but even the gentlemen who had been resenting Yang Heshu wholeheartedly couldn't help smashing the cups. It's impossible to say that they don't hate the Niu family. If it wasn't for Niu Kong, they wouldn't have contracted this damn disease. It's just that after the disease came out, Yang Heshu ran at the forefront, blocking the way for most people to survive, so everyone hated him so much. But now, the Niu family still wants to stay in Xiaoshu city. Ordinary people don't think much about it, they just feel that Niu Shishi is not worthy of being an official. But what the gentry and wealthy businessmen thought was that if the Niu family stayed in Xiaoshu city, they didn't know how many disasters would happen in the future. Moreover, this time they not only hated Yang and Shu, but also resented the Niu family. After the outbreak, they also robbed the doctors, medicinal materials, and food that were to be sent to the Niu family. There was even a landlord who, after the death of his only son, couldn't hold back his people and poured dung on the door of the cattle house. It can be said that he offended people to the death. The Niu family is still an official in Xiaoshu city. Are they still alive? So when the capital had not yet been judged, Xiaoshu was in full swing. Later, Niu Shishi was exiled, and so many assets were confiscated from his family, so there was a reason for the anger of the common people. Otherwise, Niu Shishi would be dereliction of duty at most. According to the laws of the Great Jin dynasty, he would be dismissed from office at most and go home. Court laws have always been more lenient towards officials. Yang Heshu deliberately stayed in the capital for a while longer, not only to ask for assistance from the imperial court, but also to calm the people of Xiaoshu and finish these ups. When he was in Xiaoshu, the conflict would only focus on him. When he wasn't there, Mrs. Kui moved to Zhuangzi outside the city and stayed out of the house, showing people that they were weak, not to mention that they were still manned, but they didn't do it. With the world's sympathy for the weak, they will eventually be turned away from hatred. Yang Heshu didn't leave until Dali Temple made a judgment, and Niu Kong set off from the capital to go back to Xiaoshu. Sure enough, as soon as he returned to Xiaoshu, he heard that Niu Kong was beaten with a sack after returning to Xiaoshu, and within 3 days, the Niu family moved out of Xiaoshu city. Because after they moved out of the governor's mansion, they lived in a different courtyard of their own, that is, the other courtyard was thrown into it all day long. Not only did some people splash feces and smear dirty things on the walls, but some people also threw some old clothes into the yard and smeared some yellow juice on them. Of course, the county government finally checked that it was not smallpox pox. All the clothes and quilts during the smallpox period were thoroughly cleaned or burned. Except for Manbeo, who collected a lot of things. How many other people were there? How far to hide? How can you stay? Anyway, when Yang Heshu returned to Xiaoshu, the most intense emotions of the local people had passed. Not only ordinary people, but even those gentry felt that if they really wanted to hand over the city of Xiaoshu to Niu Shishi, it would be better to leave it to Yang Heshu. At least Yang Heshu won't avenge his personal revenge publicly, and with him taking care of Xiaoshu, Xiaoshu city should slowly improve in the next 2 years, right? But all things are left to be done, and now Yang Heshu is also very busy. No matter what they think in their hearts now, we are still very friendly on the face, and my words are still effective, Yang Heshu and Manbeo Baishan said. However, for the current interests, we will definitely not have too much affection, so if you go up the grassland and try to avoid accidents, otherwise the only person I can ask for is General Gong. Manbao said, it's enough to have General Gong, the military power is in hand, it is equivalent to the entire Xiaoshu under your control, what are you afraid of? The kid is as direct as ever. Yang Heshu smiled and asked, which patients do you want to examine? Let's make 3 batches. Sister-in-law and the others, the common people, the group that uses the medicines that are not very good, and the people in the military camp. I want to give them a consultation. Kuis and the others are easy to say, just post a few posts, and the patients who were treated by Manbeo in other hospitals will come to the door on their own initiative. Yang Heshu thought for a while and said, I'll transfer the list from the county government office, and directly ask Li Zheng to notify someone to go to the county government office to see a doctor, otherwise it will spread out, and I'm afraid too many people will come. Man Bao nodded. The family is a little better, the family is average, and the family is poor. Yang Heshu expressed his understanding. Discharged this morning, so late, the next chapter is around 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2140. Zhou Liru looked at the time and reminded Man Bao that it was past noon, so Man Bao looked at the next patient and saw a trembling old man, so he said to Zhou Liru, after reading the next one, "Take a rest." Zhou Li responded, sat beside him and waved back, and the old man stepped forward. Zhou Liru asked his name, which RI or village he belonged to, and when he found someone in the booklet, Zhou Liru wrote down his name and household registration, and then began to feel his pulse to ask about his recent physical condition. After she finished asking, Man Bao also read the patient in his hand, gave him a prescription, and said to her, "There are no sequelae, but you are pregnant, this is a contraceptive pill, you are a little weak, go back and take the medicine for the first 10 days, then eat more meat and eggs, and don't eat less vegetables." The patient was surprised and delighted. Am I pregnant? Man Bao nodded, it should be 72 days. It's not necessarily accurate. It's based on your last menstrual period. The patient's tears rolled down, that's never allowed, and there are cases that come only once every 3 or 4 months. Man Bao knows that some people have insufficient blood in their bodies, so this happens, but as long as it is regular, it is not a very serious disease, but it is harmful to the body in the end. To ensure a nutritious diet, not everyone can do it, let alone taking medicine. The more patients he has seen, the more Man Bao knows this. After thinking about it, she simply pulled out a piece of paper and wrote several dietary recipes for her in one go, saying, "This is a meal for nourishing the fetus and qi and blood, you can take it back, whether it is before or after childbirth. You can eat everything." The patient was holding the paper and could not recognize the words on it. Man Baidao, the main thing is to use eggs. It's good to have a few more chickens in your house to lay eggs. Don't underestimate eggs, they are not much less nutritious than meat. She told her how to make these dishes. Man Bao doesn't know how to cook, but she has a lot of dietary recipes, including a lot of medicated recipes. She just can't make it, but patients can, most women can, they can remember it after listening to it. Sure enough, as soon as Man Bao finished speaking, she remembered it, but she didn't recognize what she said about yam and the like, so she folded the recipe up and put it in her arms, and decided to take it back to the village for recognition. The person who wrote it will take a look again, and then go to the pharmacy to buy some back. Zhou Tai said that this thing is not expensive, and the medicine can be eaten as a dish. When Man Bao waited for her to leave, he began to examine the old man's body. After a while, he determined that he had not treated any bad sequelae of smallpox either. However, it is normal for the old man to have problems. Man Bao pressed his back and waist several times. The old man cried out twice, and then he felt much better when he got up. Man Bao said, "You're fine, go back and have a good rest." The old man squinted his eyes and laughed, turned to look aside, and a young boy immediately ran up with a basket. The old man put the basket on the table full of treasures, and said with a smile, "Dr. Zhou, this is the egg given to you by the little old man. Please accept it with care." Man Bao received a lot of gifts this morning, and he declined as usual, "Old man, I don't lack food now, you can take it back, just to replenish your body." The old man had already supported his grandson's hand and turned to leave. He said, "It's your business that you don't lack it, and it's mine that I send it." You just take it?" After saying that, he walked away like a fly, and he couldn't see the trembling look just now. Man Bao opened his mouth wide. Is she misunderstanding? As soon as the old man left, the yaman came forward to inform that the diagnosis this morning will come here first. Everyone can go to have lunch first, and then come back after a while. As a result, many people in the team quickly ran up with things, shoved the things into Man Bao and Zhou Liru's hands, or put them on the edge of the table and ran away. Zhou Liru repeatedly declined, "We really can't use it." But everyone didn't listen to them at all, just put things down and left, and some didn't even line up and left quickly. Man Bao sighed, "Forget it, accept it." Zhou Liru could only call for the yaman to come and help. Most of the things brought were eggs, vegetables and rice noodles, not many, either a basket or a small cloth bag. Most of the cloth bags are only 3 or 4 pounds, but both the rice and the noodles are snow white, which is obviously a good thing. This thing is usually reluctant to take out and eat at ordinary people's homes. Everyone didn't give a lot of things, but there were so many people who couldn't bear it. The table was full of things, and the surrounding table was also full. Zhou Liru asked as he put it away, "Little ant, what should I do with these things? Shall we take them with us?" Man Bao said, "Send them all back to the prefect's mansion. We can choose some to take with us, and leave the rest to the sister-in-law to handle." She said, "I seem to have heard someone say yesterday that the sister-in-law had asked people to clean up the Shantang in Xiaohu city and adopted many orphans after the disaster. All these things can be sent to the Shantang." Kui also thought so. Seeing that Man Bao brought back so many things, she thought for a while and then thought of this place, and she said, "After the smallpox, many children's parents and relatives died, and they also have to eat hundreds of family meals to grow up in the Hui family. And some of the children suffered from the whole village, and when they returned to the village, they were also older children raising children, and I am afraid that they will become beggars soon, so I asked people to clean up the Shantang and keep them all in it." Man Bao asked, "How is the school sister going to arrange them?" Kui said with a smile, "I decided to connect the wealthy households in the city, and when the time comes, let people donate more things, and the yaman will need subsidies. They should be able to support them for a few years, and when they turn 14, they can return to their original places to farm." "Already? Then it will take several years. What have they been doing in the Shantang these few years?" Bai Shan, who had just walked around the Shantang, heard the words and said, "I went to see the children inside, little ones. The older ones are only about 2 years old, and the older ones are also 12 or 13 years old, which means that they will stay in the Shantang for about 2 to 12 years. 2 years is a short period of time, but in fact, every day is very long for people who have nothing to do. If the sister-in-law can't arrange them properly, I am afraid that they will eventually become beggars or bastards when they stay in the city." Kuishi was surprised for a moment, and then said, "Shantang sometimes picks up some work of dismantling, washing, and rubbing for them. Usually, it is not very free." Bai Shan shook his head, "I saw it today. How could a 12 or 13-year-old boy sit in a Shantang every day to remove, wash and rub hemp? And this kind of work is easy to see, but it's just a waste of money, and it doesn't make much money. There is no benefit in the future." Hearing this, Mrs. Kui paused for a moment, then asked him, "Then what advice do you have?" Bai Shan smiled and said, "Since the sister-in-law has the heart, why don't you invite a few gentlemen for them, teach them something, and give them a way to make a living? If they leave the Shantang in the future, they will not burden Xiaohu city." Next chapter at 9 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2141. Kuishi did not speak for a long time. There are not only children in the Shantang, but also widows who have been driven out without a livelihood, and some elderly widows and orphans. It is only because of the smallpox epidemic that the survival rate of children is higher, so they have more children. The number of people in the Shantang is about 4 times that before the disaster. Shi felt that Yang and Shu were too tired, and she took over Shantang because she really loved the children inside. But she thought it was the limit to guarantee them food and clothing, and let them go home and divide the fields when they were 14 years old, but Bai Shan said, "Do you want to invite them a husband?" Kui rubbed his forehead, feeling that his dowry might not be guaranteed. However, because this was Bai Shan's proposal, she had a headache, but she still asked, "Do you want to ask a gentleman to teach them how to read and write?" Reading and literacy is too expensive, but if the sister-in-law chooses a few particularly smart and clever ones to cultivate, maybe she will be able to help the sister-in-law in the future. Kui raised his eyebrows, "Isn't it literate?" Bai Shandao, you can teach them woodworking, sewing, or embroidery, arithmetic is also good, and farming, these can be learned. Shi was surprised, farming. Bai Shan nodded, and seeing her surprised face, he was also surprised. Sister-in-law doesn't think they can all farm, right? He said, cultivation is not so easy, they are still children, they must not have time to learn, such as farming time, when to sow, when to plant rice, when to fertilize, when to water, how to judge whether the crops have insects or what worm, these are all learned from the old farmer. If their parents and elders are still there, they will naturally learn these things bit by bit through their work, but now that they have lost their relatives, they certainly don't know these things. She thought it was a well-known thing, after all, just follow it. Bai Shan didn't think so. He grew up in the village, and even if he watched it once a year, by the second year, he would always make mistakes in judgment. Even now, he couldn't understand why his father-in-law could squat on the edge of the field and reach out to touch a handful of soil to know when to plant, and frost would not knock the seeds off. However, a few of Joe's brothers can learn this skill, and Thursday's brother said bluntly, "Only my second and third brothers have learned this skill, and I have not yet learned it." The old Zhutu said directly, "If the fourth, fifth, and sixth are allowed to farm the land by themselves, they will have to be patched and starved within 3 years. Obviously, farming is not something anyone can do, even with Shirulang and the others after so many years of farming, they can't independently complete an entire farming season. Since you want to allocate the land to them when they turn 14, you have to make sure that they can cultivate the land themselves." Bai Erlang was very sympathetic to the children in the Shantang, and said, "Cultivating the land is hard work." Lu Huan and Yin may have never planted seeds before, and they can still understand the meaning of his words for the time being. Man Bao, who has been silent, said, "The cost is too high." Lu Huan and Yin thought, "Is it a lot of money? Why don't the two people who eat minced meat can't understand, after all, they are born to read, this is a must, they know that most children rarely read, because reading costs money, but isn't it Master Yang and Madam Yang? They shouldn't spend much money, right? Good deeds." After getting the luggage from home, Lu Huan, who has a lot of money, said, "Why don't I donate some money? How much do they pay for 2 years of study?" Bai Shan glanced at him and ignored him, and said to Mrs. Kui, "Sister-in-law can discuss with each family, and each family will produce a few people who can read and write arithmetic, embroidery, tailor, and carpentry to teach the children in the Shantang. It shouldn't be difficult. Also, if you want to go back to farming now that you are old, you can also ask an old farmer in the village to teach him for 2 years. When he is 14 years old, he will return to the village and divide the fields and grain and farming tools. You don't have to worry about supporting yourself." Kui thinks this is a big project, but inexplicably a little excited. After turning around twice, she said, "Your idea is good. You can decide after I think about it. If you want to do this, you have to do it for a long time, not just 1 or 2 years, at least 12 years, or even longer." but they may not be able to stay in Xiaoshu for such a long time. Then they have to form a rule, even if they leave, this thing can continue, otherwise things will be broken as soon as they leave, and the children who have learned half of them will have no whereabouts. By the time Choi pondered. Seeing that she was thinking, Man Bao and the others stopped disturbing her and turned to leave. After leaving the yard, Man Bao asked them, "Where have you been today?" "By Shandao, just walking around the city. We used to walk around the streets to arrange patients, knowing that some people have some resentment against Brother Yang. I just wanted to see how Brother Yang comforted them, but we walked to Shantang." He said, "Sister-in-law is right. There are many more people in the Shantang than before. I remember that the Shantang was also vacated to arrange disaster victims, but now there are more people living in it than during the disaster." "So much?" Bai Shan nodded. "Most of them are children whose parents lost their lives outside, and some were driven out after their fathers lost or their mothers lost, and some." He paused and said, "It was the parents who were still alive but were abandoned." Man Bao was taken aback and asked, "Why?" Bai Erlang was indignant, "Because they left too many pockmarks on their faces." He is still angry to this day. "We spent a day in a shantang, and there were 9 children who were abandoned by their parents because they had too many acne marks on their bodies." Bai Shan also sighed. At that time, he thought that people were lucky if they survived. Who would have thought that after surviving, someone would abandon their children for such reasons? The steward in the shantang said that when the children were first thrown, they found them by themselves, but they were thrown away again. 3 of them were thrown directly into the woods, and the mountain people who went into the mountains to find wild vegetables met them and hugged them. Then nothing happened. Bai Shan said, "Because of this, Brother Yang also arrested several people, but instead of letting them take the children back, they sent them all to the shantang and arranged for them." Cut off the book. It was also because Yang and Shu intervened that the steward mentioned them when they were looking at the children in the shantang. Bai Shan asked Man Bao, "Can't they get rid of the acne marks on their bodies?" The images of those children flashed in his mind. Although he wouldn't be scared, but the impact on them was really great. When he went to see the 9 children, they were always alone, basically don't look up at people. Man Bao frowned. There is currently no way to get rid of acne. Or she could focus on discussing this aspect with teacher Mo. Woohoo, finally on time for a while. Good night. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2142. Man Bao turned over all the prescriptions for acne that she had seen in her mind, but there were quite a few, but the acne scars of smallpox were basically not among them. Bai Shan frowned as soon as they saw her talking, and then walking straight forward without stopping when they passed their own yard. Crowd. Lu Huan opened his mouth to scream, but Zhou Lyra gave him a sideways glance, not allowing him to make a sound to frighten her aunt, and then hurriedly ran after him. Bai Shan said to several people, "You go back first, and I'll walk with her." He didn't let Zhou Lyra follow. "You've been busy all day, so go back and rest first." She was relieved to hand over her aunt to her uncle Zhou Lyra. She nodded, turned around and went back to the yard. Bai Shan went forward beside Man Bao, and seeing that she knew how to turn along the road, he simply took her hand and led the way. The two walked towards the garden, and they simply walked around the garden. When Man Bao came back to his senses, they had walked around the garden twice. Bai Shan shook her hand and asked, "How is it, have you thought of a way?" Man Bao said, "There is no good way, but it should be possible to try medication to relieve symptoms." She decided to go back to Mr. Mo to study it. Because of the smallpox epidemic in Xiaoshu, Mr. Mo recently took a lot of time to study smallpox. For this reason, he found a lot of smallpox-related prescriptions. Naturally, there are also prescriptions for acne. He said, "It's better to use direct photon peeling." The acne scars formed by smallpox are uneven, and the color is uneven. If you only apply medicine and take medicine, I can't think of a good way. He has seen the acne scars left by Joe Man's photo of smallpox. It's just normal. Seriously, even in his era, he can only change his entire face. If he only relies on drugs. Mr. Mo touched his chin and thought, I heard that there is a biological research laboratory in the Second Union School that is studying the technology of worm skin peeling. Maybe that one can give it a try. Manbao asked curiously, what is a worm? A cultivated granule organism that devours the skin, but the reacted mucus can also promote skin growth and speed up metabolism. It is said that it is safer and more effective than photon skin resurfacing technology, so someone is doing this research recently. Manbao was stunned when he heard it. Converted to a technology that he could understand, it was a kind of bug that would gnaw a person's face and secrete something to speed up the growth of the skin. She shuddered and asked, then, how can you be sure that the skin that has been gnawed will grow out of your own satisfaction? Across the light curtain, Teacher Mo looked up at Joe Man and smiled slightly. It doesn't matter what human skin looks like, because flesh and blood grows along the bones, so as long as your bones don't change, the flesh that grows will grow out of it. It's you, but because it's a newborn, it's as smooth and flawless as a newborn. Manbao reached out and touched the little red spot on her nose. She went to 2 appointments in addition to seeing a doctor in the past 2 days. She ate lamb, which might be a little dry, so this morning, a pimple appeared on her nose. Smallpox. If you use worms. Teacher Mo also saw it and said, your newly grown face will be more tender and clean than it is now, but what? However, the safety of this has not yet been determined. It takes at least 3 years for a new technology to be tested from development to application. I haven't heard that it can be used yet, Teacher Mo said slowly. Also, yes, this is true. I can't give you something cultivated, and there shouldn't be any transactions in the encyclopedia and the mall. 10,000 steps back and said that it can be traded. Can you afford the technology tax? Manbao's boiling heart fell back and asked, Mr. Mo, you better give me a prescription and teach me some treatments that I can use. Teacher Mo said, I don't have any patients, but I can use the case data you gave to conduct research. I'm not sure what the effect will be. Manbao immediately said, we can first select a few prescriptions to try, and the children in the Shantang should try it. Teacher Mo nodded after thinking about it, yes. After saying this, Teacher Mo asked, how far are you from where the meteorite fell? Manbao said, it's still a long way off, we've only walked 1/10 of the distance. Teacher Mo frowned, your world is that big? Manbao nodded, very big. Keek couldn't help but quietly complained about the data. It's a big surprise. It's not as big as their planet, not to mention it's only a corner of the planet. It's obviously because the transportation is behind, and they're going too slowly. But slowness also has the advantage of being slow. Recently, Keek has included several things. In addition to plants, there are also bugs that Manbao and the two climb to catch on trees. The harvest is not bad so far. It's just that the reward points are not too many except for the mountain, ranging from dozens to 200 or 300. There are a little more Shankong, but only more than 1,800. Manbao is quite satisfied with this, and if there is any excess, he will hang it on the forum to sell. In the forum, because people from all over the world generally know that she is young, sometimes people who see her things hang up for a long time and no one buys them, and some people pay to buy them, just to make her happy. Anyway, there are not many points, and it is very interesting to talk to this little girl. After all, it is still a cub, and it should be taken care of as an adult. Since knowing that Joe Man was going to start collecting meteorites, Mr. Mo has paid more attention to Joe Man, and the Alliance and the Encyclopedia have been asking about the progress of this matter every now and then. Not only Mr. Mo, but Keek has been paid more attention. And because Keek is a subsystem of the encyclopedia, the Alliance and the encyclopedia prefer to ask directly on the program. This has caused Keek to be very honest recently. Well, Manbao is also very honest. Teacher Mo encouraged Manbao and told her about the current research progress of rice seeds. The secondary seeds you gave have been improved, and the seeds you gave before are the improved 5th generation seeds. DRD is very confident in this, and there should be no problems like the previous one. Have you planted it? Manbao nodded. I asked my eldest brother to plant them. Didn't I give you some soil and water to simulate my environment? That can only simulate a small environment, not a large environment, said Mr. Mo. I estimate that to stabilize the rice seeds, we need to study for at least 3 years. This is because we can do it all year round. Experiment, in your world, I'm afraid it won't last for 12 years. Teacher Mo said so much to motivate her, but if the money is in place, the speed should be faster. Thinking of the bad weather this year, Manbao asked curiously, how much faster? It should be a year sooner. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2143. Manbao looked at his points, but it takes a lot of money to do experiments. I have this money. Teacher Mo didn't intend to let her pay by herself, but she asked curiously, how much money do you have? Manbao said a number, and Mr. Mo said with disgust, this is too few, even a simulation shed can't be built. Don't think about it, you should find the meteorite as soon as possible, and then ask the Alliance for money, and then invest it later. Go to DRD. Teacher Mo thought of something and reminded her, you and the Alliance have finished taking the money, you can ask for another money from the encyclopedia and my school. Manbao said, not good, one item has to be sold 3 times. You are the owner of the thing. The encyclopedia and the school want to get the data of the thing from you, and naturally they have to pay you a part of the money. It seemed to make sense, but she always felt that something was not right. Manbao thought about it, couldn't figure it out, and simply didn't want to. She asked, how can I contact your school? Teacher Mo glanced at her and said, am I not here? He is an employee of the school. Isn't it easy to find the school? Manbao. As for the encyclopedia, it is easier. Isn't her system the encyclopedia? Manbao kept this matter in his mind. The teacher and the student discussed for half an evening. The next day, Manbao got up and took out 3 prescriptions from the space. She handed the prescriptions to Zhou Liru and said, go to the pharmacy to get the medicine, take it back and try to make an ointment. Zhou Liru looked at the prescription and found that there were not many things used. Most of the medicines were ordinary, so he went into the house to get the money. After Manbao finished his breakfast, he quietly yawned and got up, you buy the medicine first and deal with it. I will go to the county government office today to see the patient for another day. Zhou responded as follows. The patients that Yang Hesha gave her according to the proportion should be able to read it this afternoon. Today, Mr. Zhuang took Bai Shan and a few to communicate with the doctors and students of Ziyazhu University. Since he is here to study, as long as he has the conditions, he still has to learn and communicate. Before Bai Shan went out, he saw Manbao hurriedly going out, so he turned his horse's head and said to her, I'll find you when I'm done here. We have to stay in Ziyazhu for 2 more days, so don't worry. Only planning to stay for 2 days, Mr. Zhuang, who was leaving the day after tomorrow, paused, glanced at the 2 disciples, and said nothing. After getting in the car, he asked Bai Erlang, who didn't want to ride a horse because he was sleepy, what did you do yesterday, and you want to stay for 2 more days? Bai Erlang yawned and said, we didn't do anything, Oh, maybe they want to treat the pockmarks on the faces of the children in Shantang. Mr. Zhuang nodded and asked about Shantang's situation. Man Bao hurried to the county office, where the patients who were notified were already queuing up. She looked at everyone, and in fact, some people had the sequelae of medication. It's just that there are too many patients, and she can't remember whether the patient is her own, let alone remember their medication. If the patient belonged to her, she would go to the medical record booklet, and maybe she could find the person. The patient was in a daze and didn't know what medicine he was taking. But she can't remember the patient, but the patient can remember the person who treated him. It was a doctor surnamed Lu who gave me the treatment. At that time, the Dr. Lu said that my liver was not good, and there were 2 medicines in it. It can't be used, and in order to cure the disease, you must first protect the liver. When he said this, Man Bao could roughly infer his prescription. She touched his pulse again, and thoughtfully prescribed 2 prescriptions for him, saying, "Take this prescription first, and the one that regulates the body will take it for a month, and then take this prescription, and also take it for a month." She glanced at the other party, smelled the faint smell on the other party's body, and said, "You can't drink alcohol in the future, and don't eat too greasy and spicy food." Afterwards, she and Bai Shan, who came to help, said, "I have carefully looked at the patient's condition. Not only does he have liver problems, but he also has problems with his stomach. It is also his ability that Imperial Physician Lu can snatch people back from smallpox under such circumstances." Bai Shan said, "Isn't there any sequelae? Compared to death, the after effects left are not worth mentioning at all. If I come, the after effects will only be bigger." When Man Bao said this, he didn't avoid the patient, so the word was spread and reached the patient and his family. They felt a lot better. "Father, you can't drink any more in the future. The imperial doctor also warned me." The patient's face flushed red. Man Bao only checked out 3 patients with medication sequelae. 2 of them had to use other medicines because they had other illnesses. Because they were temporarily adjusted medicines, some monarchs and ministers could not afford them, while others had. The residual toxicity is too heavy, so there are sequelae. There is only 1 sequelae left because of its greater reaction to some drugs. Man Bao gave them a prescription to adjust. At this time, 2 to 5 months have passed since the smallpox medication, and the time is not short. The sequelae that appeared have basically appeared. Man Bao recorded all of these and could report to the Taiyuan hospital. It seems that several of the prescriptions they summed up for the smallpox epidemic can be used, especially 3 of them. The effect is very good. Man Bao wrote here for a while, but if acupuncture can be added, the effect will be better. Man Bao simply wrote down the feasible sets of needle movements, and then put it in an envelope and handed it to Daji. When they left Xiaozhu, they could hand it over to the post station and take them back to the capital together. These are to be summarized and will be used later. After Man Bao finished writing, he remembered the prescription and ran to find Zhou Liru. Zhou Liru had already finished processing the medicinal materials, and he just put them in the pot and boiled them, but the ointment is not so easy to make. There are not many kinds of medicinal materials, but they are all the same, and they will have to be cooked tomorrow. She was quite proficient in making ointments, even more proficient than Zhou Man. When she saw my aunt coming over, she immediately got up from the ground. "Little aunt, I have boiled all the medicine." Man Bao nodded. She used 3 stoves to boil the medicine. Man Bao went to look at the rest of the herbs and found that she had already prepared all the ingredients that should be prepared. Pestle came, "I'll grind the powder." Bai Shan also came over, rolled up his sleeves and helped. When Bai Erlang and the others came over, the 3 had already processed half of the medicinal materials. Bai Erlang was forced to be a little familiar with this matter, so he also sat down to help. Yin or himself knew a lot of medicinal materials, but he was not familiar with handling medicinal materials. but it didn't matter, this kind of thing could be learned. The easiest thing was to cut the medicinal materials. So when Yang and Shuxia came over, they saw 6 people occupying the kitchen in the courtyard, and each of them had medicinal herbs being processed in front of them, and there was a strong medicinal smell inside. He said, "Why did the backyard smell like medicine when he arrived?" and he thought that someone at home was sick again. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2144. Manbao's prescription listed a lot of medicines, and Zhou Liru bought them all, so the ointment he made, a little too much. However, Manbao originally planned to prepare more for them. She divided the prepared ointment into jars, labeled them, and sent them to the Shantang together with Bai Shan. There are no other problems with several children, but there are many pock marks. The oldest of them was only 9 years old, probably because of their young age, so they couldn't resist scratching when they were smallpox. At that time, their family members could not always watch like the rich and famous. Manbao checked the acne marks on their faces, felt the pulse again, and distributed the ointment to them. 3 ointments, 9 people, 1 for every 3 people. She said, "I haven't used these 3 ointments, so I'm not sure how effective they are, but they all have the effect of removing acne scars. You guys use them first, and then I'll come back to see the effect and then adjust them. Don't change the ointment in the middle. I have made everyone's ointment for a year." Manbao taught them how to use it. Not only did they have pock marks on their faces, but they also had a lot of acne marks on their bodies, but obviously they couldn't take care of their bodies now, so Manbao only asked them to wipe their faces and necks. "Wipe it first." Bai Shan asked the steward of the Shantang, and asked him to divide the 9 children into 2 rooms according to men and women, and said, "Take care of the people in the Shantang, don't let people bully them, their medicine can only be theirs. Use it, we will see the effect in a year." He pointedly said, "Now they are the pharmacists of Zhou Imperial Physician." Originally, they only thought that this was their kind-hearted steward, and immediately did not dare to neglect. Since it is a medicine person, Zhou Tai will definitely see the medicine person taking medicine. Seeing that he was interested, Bai Shan went to find Manbao and a few people who had a good relationship with the children, and went back to the governor's mansion with them. After yesterday, Yang Heshu became more concerned about Shantang. Knowing that Mrs. Kui was already looking for someone, he really planned to invite a husband for the children, so he smiled and shook his head. When the master saw it, he smiled and asked, "Isn't your lord optimistic about this?" "No, this matter is not only beneficial to Xiaohu's future, but also to those children," he said. "I was also very worried. Xiaohu does not lack land, but even if these children are 14 points of land, it's also hard to make a living off the land, let alone keep it. I originally wanted to find another way for them, or send them to the working field to study with the tenant farmers for a few years, and force them to divide the fields until they are 16 years old. At that time, the yamen can give them a one-time salary for 2 years to help them. Buying grain, farm implements, and building a house should be better than having nothing but a field at the age of 14, but..." Yang Heshu paused and said, "The children are of different ages. All I can manage is the last few years in the tenure, at most 6 years. What about the remaining children after 6 years? The new official will not necessarily continue his policies." Master thought for a while and said, "Do you want to take this opportunity to make this a Shantang practice and include it in the rules of Xiaohu?" Yang Heshu nodded, "Yes, Bai Shan's idea is very good, and there is a lot of room for manipulation." He smiled and said, "Except for a little, it costs money." The master thought for a while, it was indeed expensive, and now the madam has not reacted, just thought that the husband was from their own house and it was not expensive, but he did not know that for teaching, the training of the husband never accounted for the bulk. Teaching materials have always accounted for the bulk of the expenses. Materials used by teachers, materials used by students, and food, drink, and housing for so many people in the Shantang are the biggest expenses. Master, Bai Gongzi is cheating, madam. Yang Hesha smiled and said, that kid thinks I'm still the same as in Lujian County. How can he cheat MRS and me? The master smiled and said, but the Lord is really out of money now, isn't it still the wife who will pay in the end? So. Yang Hesha couldn't help laughing when he heard the words, and in the end, he still cheated MRS. Yang Haoi is rich, very rich, but since he gave Yang's business in Jiangnan to the emperor, Yang Haoi stopped giving him money. Yang Hesha thought about it and asked, has the caravan sent to Jiangnan returned? No, it is estimated that we will have to wait another 2 months. This is the critical moment for Jiangnan to receive tea. Yang Hesha nodded, when they come back, the money in the house should be better. The master wanted to sigh in his heart, when did the adults worry about money? But it's always better to use your own money. So the Lord decided to follow the white master's idea. It's just that you spend a lot of money. Why don't you do things where the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? In Yang Hesha's view, things that can be solved with money are not difficult problems. Get out of the public service first, and find a way to keep them profitable. If they can't, then pay for them and force them to build a profit-making cycle structure, so that things can go on forever, and eventually it will become a rule. Bai Shan also seemed to know that he was cheating, so he used the extra 2 days he stayed to pull Bai Arian or a few eloquently to write several plans for the Shantang, and before leaving, he gave the plan to MRS. Kui was stunned when he received this, but he didn't expect Bai Shan and the others to do this. Seeing her expression like this, Bai Shan felt a little guilty for this sister-in-law, and he said, sister-in-law, we wrote this, you can take a look, it may be useful. Kui only turned 2 pages before she stopped, and she asked, you have written in such detail. Even how to get children to choose what to learn is clearly written. Bai Shan said embarrassedly, we wrote about how to build the imperial physician's office before. Shantang is even smaller than the imperial physician's office. In fact, this is a little bit of experience from the establishment of the imperial physician's office. Although it is troublesome at first, as long as it is done well in the first year, after forming the rules, there will be no trouble later, as long as you follow the rules. It was the first time that Kuishi came into contact with such a thing in her lifetime. She held it tightly and nodded to Bai Shan and the others, don't worry, I will take a serious look at it. Bai Shan breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, this planning book is not only for Kuishi, but also for Yang Heshu. Shantang's business is not as small as Kui thinks, as long as a few people are selected to be sent over to be husbands. There are too many things to do, and Yang Heshu's support and help are definitely needed in the early stage. Sure enough, after reading the plan, Kui went to the study to find Yang Heshu. Yang Heshu saw the planning book, smiled and said, they wrote it well, and it can be used with just a few changes. What to change? Yang Heshu took a pen and crossed out what he thought was inappropriate in the planning book, or added some details, or deleted some things. The couple sat at the desk to discuss, and when they went to see Bai Shan off the next day, their eyes were blue. Man Bao, who slept well and was in better spirits, looked at this and that, and said to them with a sad face, don't stay up late, go to bed early and get up early to be healthy, you are young now and don't know how to take care of it, and you will grow old in the future. Mr. Zhuan couldn't listen anymore. He cut her words after a light cough, and said to Yang Heshu, Sir Yang, just send it here, I don't think it's getting too early, we'll set off now. Yang Heshu didn't want to listen to Man Bao's health-preserving scriptures either, so he nodded with a smile and sent them to the car. Man Bao had to get in the car, but he still opened the curtain and leaned on the window and said to Yang Heshu, Brother Yang, you look so good looking, you must stay up late. Not only will your eyes turn blue, but your face will be dark yellow. In the future, I will lose hair and become bald and gain weight." Yang Hesha smiled and waved, "You guys take care all the way." Bai Shan pulled Man Bao away from the window, waved to Yang Hesha with a slap behind him, "Goodbye brother Yang. See you tomorrow."